Lieutenant Ethan Frost had seen the aftermath of war across 17 systems, but something about the abandoned Meridian Research Facility made his skin crawl. The conquering Valkyrie had departed weeks ago, leaving behind their usual efficient destruction and unusual silence. Echo Team, maintain perimeter. I'm detecting anomalous heat signatures in sublevel 3, Ethan spoke into his comm unit, adjusting the settings on his scanner. Command had dispatched his salvage unit to recover any valuable tech, not to investigate anomalies. But Ethan had built his reputation on curiosity. Copy that, Lieutenant, came the response. Be advised, facility was classified as sanitized. No survivors reported. Ethan nodded absently, his boots echoing on metal stairs as he descended deeper into the facility. The deeper he went, the stronger the smell, antiseptic overlaying something primal and distressing. Fear had a scent. He'd recognized it on enough battlefields. The scanner led him to a reinforced door with Valkyrie glyphs he roughly translated as specimen containment. Using his override codes, the door reluctantly yielded with a hydraulic hiss. His light beam cut through darkness, revealing rows of empty examination tables, shattered equipment, and abandoned research stations. It was what the Valkyrie typically left behind when they conquered a planet. Methodical destruction of anything they couldn't use, anyone they couldn't subjugate. The Nyx, native to this world, had been particularly resistant to Valkyrie rule and had paid the ultimate price for their defiance. Official reports classified them as functionally extinct. That's when he heard it, a faint, raspy sound like breathing through damaged vocal cords. A dying machine, perhaps, or something else. Against training and protocol, Ethan switched his light to low intensity and followed the sound to the rear of the facility. His scanner detected the heat signature behind a heavy metal door. No researcher would design a door like this. This was a cell. The keypad appeared damaged, but his multi-tool made quick work of the lock. The door swung open with a groan of protest, and Ethan's light fell upon a scene that would haunt him for years to come. A cage. Inside, curled into herself on cold metal, was a female Nyx. Her violet-gray skin was stretched over pronounced bones, marked with lacerations and what appeared to be scientific notation carved directly into her flesh. Her wrists and ankles bore the raw evidence of long-term restraint. Her eyes, large, luminous, with vertical pupils, squinted painfully at his light before she covered her face with trembling hands. Jesus Christ, Ethan whispered, immediately lowering his beam. The Nyx were supposed to be gone. Eradicated. Not studied. Not kept like laboratory animals. She made a small, broken sound and pressed herself against the far side of the cage, her matted silver-white hair hanging in front of her face. A metal collar around her neck bore Valkyrie writing. Specimen N7. Terminal Research Authorization. Terminal Research. The euphemism made his stomach turn. It's okay, he said softly, knowing she couldn't understand him. He removed his helmet, wanting her to see his face, to see he wasn't Valkyrie. I'm not going to hurt you. His scanner assessed her vital signs. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, elevated stress hormones, internal injuries. She wouldn't survive another day without medical intervention. Official protocol was clear. Non-essential cargo was to be documented and left for specialized retrieval teams. A surviving Nyx would trigger a cascade of bureaucratic complications and likely result in her disappearance into some other research facility. Ethan made his decision in seconds. He deactivated his comm unit. The cage lock was surprisingly simple, designed to keep something in, not someone out. When it fell away, the Nyx female flinched as though expecting punishment. He removed his thermal jacket and held it out toward her, moving with deliberate slowness. My name is Ethan, he said, pointing to himself. Then he gestured to the jacket. This is for you. She didn't move at first, watching him with wary, intelligent eyes. Then, with movements so cautious they broke his heart, she reached for the jacket. Her hand, four-fingered with articulated joints unlike human anatomy, hesitated before touching the fabric. When she pulled it around her shoulders, she made a sound that might have been a sigh. I'm getting you out of here, Ethan said, knowing communication would come later. He pulled an emergency nutrient pack from his belt and opened it, offering the water first. She drank greedily, desperately, water spilling down her chin. He activated his personal medical kit, administering basic stabilizing treatments while keeping his movements telegraphed and gentle. Her body was a map of systematic abuse disguised as science, but her eyes, they held something Ethan recognized. Resilience. When he helped her stand, she collapsed against him, too weak to walk. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms, her weight shocking in its lightness. She fit against his chest like she'd been hollowed out from the inside. "Echo team," he said, reactivating his calm, preparing to return to ship. "Found salvageable materials." The lie came easily. Some rules deserved to be broken. As he carried her from her prison, her hand closed weakly around the fabric of his uniform. A gesture that needed no translation. "Don't leave me." "I won't," he whispered, though she couldn't understand. "I promise." Above them, through a broken ceiling panel, the alien sky of Vesta shone with unfamiliar constellations. For the first time in what must have been years, the Nyx woman looked up at the stars of her homeworld, not as a captive, but as someone on the edge of freedom. Ethan adjusted his hold, careful of her injuries. They had a long journey ahead. But for now, each step away from that cage was a victory. The Wanderer's medical bay hummed with quiet efficiency as Ethan watched the vitals monitor above the recovery pod. 3 days had passed since he'd smuggled the Nyx woman aboard his salvage vessel, listing her in the manifest as biological research materials. Technically not a lie. Captain Rivera had raised an eyebrow, but asked no questions. He'd served with Ethan long enough to know when to look the other way. "Her cellular regeneration is remarkable," Dr. Avery Patel said, studying her readings. "Despite severe malnutrition, her body is healing at twice the human rate." The Valkyrie weren't wrong about Nyx's resilience. They were wrong about everything else, Ethan said sharply. Avery nodded, chastened. "Sorry. Scientific curiosity." She lowered her voice. "You know Command will discover her eventually. What's your plan then?" Ethan's jaw tightened. One problem at a time. The Nyx woman's eyelids fluttered, then opened. For a moment, panic flashed across her features, the terror of waking to another day of captivity. Then her gaze found Ethan. Recognition. Not safety, not yet, but perhaps the memory of kindness. "You're on my ship," Ethan said gently, approaching slowly. "You're safe." She watched him with those vertical pupilled eyes that somehow conveyed emotions he could read despite their alien structure. Confusion. Wariness. The fragile beginnings of hope. "I'm going to try something," he said, tapping his translator device. Nyx language had been documented before their near extinction. "Can you understand me?" he asked, the device rendering his words into the musical clicks and tones of her native tongue. Her eyes widened. She made a hoarse sound, then winced, touching her throat where the control collar had damaged her vocal cords. "It's okay," Ethan said, retrieving a datapad. "You can write, if it's easier." She took the pad hesitantly, her four-fingered hand trembling. After a moment, she wrote in shaky Nyx script that the translator rendered. "Why help monster?" Ethan's chest tightened. "You're not a monster. Valkyries say Nyx animals. Test subjects. Not people." "The Valkyrie are wrong," Ethan said firmly. "Do you have a name?" She stared at the pad for a long moment before writing. "Specimen N7. "That's not a name," he said, struggling to keep anger from his voice. "Before. What were you called before?" Her hands hovered over the pad, uncertain, as if reaching for something long forgotten. Finally, "Kira. I was Kira." "Kira," Ethan repeated, letting the name settle between them like a bridge. "I'm Ethan." For the next week, recovery meant more than healing her physical wounds. It meant teaching Kira to hold a spoon again, to sleep without restraints, to accept that no punishment would follow accepting food or water. Each small victory, Kira sleeping through the night, Kira finishing a meal, Kira meeting his eyes for more than a fleeting second, felt monumental. On the 8th day, she spoke her first word aloud. "Ethan." Her voice was rough from disuse and damage, but the sound of his name in her mouth made something shift in his chest. "That's right," he said, smiling. "Good. Good," she repeated, the word unpracticed but deliberate. The translator became less necessary as Kira absorbed human language with remarkable speed. Her sentences remained fragmented, but her comprehension grew daily. What emerged was not just intelligence, but a dry wit that had somehow survived her ordeal. "Human food," she said one evening, wrinkling her nose at the protein ration Ethan offered. "Not good." Ethan laughed. "Can't argue with that." When Kira finally left the medical bay for proper quarters, Ethan showed her how to use the shower. The concept delighted her, water as cleansing ritual rather than punishment. She stood under the spray with closed eyes, silver-white hair plastered to her violet-gray skin, face turned upward in what might have been prayer. Ethan averted his eyes, respecting her privacy, but not before noticing how her body had begun to fill out, no longer skeletal, but lithe and strong. The scientific notations carved into her skin were fading to silver traces, like a language being forgotten. Nightmares remained her most persistent enemy. Ethan would wake to sounds of distress from her quarters, find her tangled in sheets, fighting invisible restraints. The first time, she'd recoiled from his approach. By the fifth night, she reached for him. "Stay," she whispered, her hand cool against his arm. "Dreams, bad." He sat beside her bed, keeping careful distance. "I'll stay until you sleep." But as dawn cycle approached and Kira's breathing finally steadied, her hand still held his wrist. Touch, so long weaponized against her, reclaimed as comfort. Ethan remained, watching the artificial dawn light trace patterns across her face, wondering at the strange paths that had led them both here. The ship's comm system interrupted his thoughts. "Lieutenant Frost," Captain Rivera's voice crackled. "Report to command immediately. We have a situation." Kira's eyes snapped open, instantly alert. The vulnerability of sleep vanished beneath instinctive wariness. "It's okay," Ethan said, though he wasn't certain it was. "Stay here. Rest." She sat up, the standard issue shirt he'd given her hanging loose on her frame. "Trouble, for me?" The question held centuries of history, the understanding that her existence had always meant trouble for someone. "No," Ethan said with more confidence than he felt. "Trouble for me, maybe. You're not responsible for my choices." As he headed for the command deck, Ethan realized a fundamental shift had occurred without his noticing. What had begun as an instinctive rescue, a moral imperative, had become something more complicated. In caring for Kira, in witnessing her reclamation of personhood day by day, he'd come to see her not as a victim or a refugee or even a responsibility. She was, simply, Kira, and his world had quietly rearranged itself around that fact. Captain Rivera's expression confirmed his fears. "Military inspection shuttle inbound. Routine cargo verification, they say." He fixed Ethan with a knowing look. "Your biological research materials might raise questions I can't deflect." Ethan nodded. "Understood, sir." "Whatever you're planning," Rivera said, turning back to the command console, "I don't want to know. But make it quick." Ethan returned to Kira's quarters to find her dressed in the spare uniform he'd provided, hair neatly braided. She stood with quiet dignity, shoulders straight. "Humans coming," she said. "Not a question. Find me." "Yes," Ethan admitted. "But they won't take you. Not if I can help it." Something shifted in her expression, a softness at odds with her ready-for-battle stance. Why Ethan risk? For me? The question deserved an answer he wasn't sure how to give. Instead, he took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Because some things matter more than rules," he said finally. "Come on. I know where you'll be safe." The inspection came and went without incident, Kira hidden within a modified cargo container in the Wanderer's least frequented storage bay, breathing through filters while military personnel cataloged the ship's contents. When Ethan finally unsealed the container, Kira emerged with quiet dignity rather than the panic he'd feared. "You came back," she said simply. Those 3 words carried a weight Ethan felt in his chest. "I'll always come back," he promised, helping her out of the cramped space. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to life aboard the Wanderer. Kira's strength returned in full, her movements gaining fluid grace that hinted at what she had been before captivity. Her command of human language improved daily, gaps filling with remarkable speed. She began joining the crew for meals, at first sitting silently beside Ethan, then gradually engaging in careful conversation. Most gave her respectful distance, but Engineer Tomas Vega took to teaching her ship systems with patient enthusiasm. Dr. Patel continued monitoring her recovery, their medical discussions evolving into philosophical debates about the universe's patterns. Captain Rivera maintained professional distance but ensured the crew understood. Kira was under protection. Only Navigator Hayes kept conspicuous space between himself and the alien, his distrust barely concealed. Ethan kept watchful eyes on these interactions, but Kira seemed unbothered. "Fear is natural," she told Ethan one evening as they sat in the observation deck, stars streaming past in hyperspace ribbons. "My people feared yours before we understood." "And now?" Ethan asked. Kira considered the question, her profile outlined in starlight. "Now I know. Humans are like universe. Contain everything. Cruelty and kindness. Darkness and light. And which am I?" The question escaped before he could reconsider. Kira turned to him, those vertical pupilled eyes searching his face with unnerving perception. "You are Dawn," she said finally. The time between. That night marked a turning point. Their conversations deepened, extending into ship's night cycle as Kira shared fragmented memories of Nick's culture, their reverence for water, their communal raising of children, their belief that consciousness flowed between stars. In return, Ethan spoke of Earth's oceans, human music, his childhood in the Arizona desert. "Show me," Kira said when he described dancing. The observation deck became their makeshift ballroom, stars wheeling overhead as Ethan guided her through simple steps. Kira's innate grace made her a natural dancer, though she laughed at the formality of human patterns. "Nick's dance for joy, for rain, for life," she explained, demonstrating flowing movements that made her seem briefly weightless. "Not for rules." Ethan watched, transfixed, as she moved like water through air, silver-white hair catching starlight. When she extended her hand in invitation, he accepted without hesitation. Their improvised dance became something neither human nor Nick's, but uniquely theirs. A conversation without words, bodies speaking a language neither had known they shared. When the music ended, they remained close, breathing synchronized. Kira's hand rested against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "Different rhythm," she murmured, "but same purpose." The first kiss happened naturally, crossing the final distance between them. Her lips were cooler than human temperature, but soft, hesitant at first, then meeting his with increasing certainty. When they parted, Kira's eyes held questions for which Ethan had no simple answers. "Is this permitted?" she asked. "Human and Nick's?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, "but I don't care." That night in his quarters, their exploration of each other was gentle, unhurried. Ethan memorized the patterns of silver markings across her violet skin, the slightly different architecture of her body. Kira approached him with curious wonder, as if rediscovering that touch could bring pleasure rather than pain. "Your heart," she whispered, palm pressed against his chest, "speaks to mine." In the artificial night, they created something ancient and new, a bridge between worlds that neither had imagined possible. Afterward, Kira slept curled against him, her body's cooler temperature a balm against his warmth. For the first time since he'd found her, she slept without nightmares. Their private universe lasted precisely 17 days. The military summons arrived without warning. Lieutenant Frost ordered to report to Central Command regarding unauthorized biological cargo transport and potential violation of interspecies protocols. "They know," Captain Rivera said grimly, handing Ethan the official notice. "Someone talked." "Hayes, most likely." Ethan's mind raced through options, none good. "How long until we reach Central?" 3 days. Maybe 4 if we develop engine troubles. Rivera's expression remained carefully neutral. "Whatever your plan, make it good. They'll separate you for questioning." And Kira. He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. They both knew what happened to specimens in military research divisions. That night, Ethan laid out the situation to Kira without softening the truth. She deserved that much. "They will take me back to laboratory," she said calmly. "No," Ethan said fiercely. "I won't let that happen. You cannot fight entire military. Watch me." Kira touched his face, her expression soft with an emotion he couldn't name. "My stubborn human," she said. Then, more seriously, "There is another way." She described fragments of rumors, whispers among the captive Nicks before most had perished. Tales of survivors who had escaped to hidden enclaves on Vesta's southern continent. Places the Valkyrie had deemed uninhabitable and left unsearched. "If they exist," Ethan said slowly, "you could rejoin your people." "Yes." Kira's eyes held his. "But I would need to reach Vesta. Need help." The plan formed between them like a constellation, dangerous, desperate, but offering a slim path forward. They would need to steal a shuttle, create a diversion, risk everything on rumors that might prove false. "If we're caught," Ethan warned, "it's treason for me. And for you." "I know prison," Kira interrupted. "Not afraid of returning. Only afraid of—" She hesitated, searching for words. "Of never knowing this." Her hand gestured between them, encompassing everything they had become to each other. That night their lovemaking carried new urgency, the awareness of borrowed time. Ethan memorized every detail. The specific curve where her neck met shoulder, the sound of his name in her throaty voice, the way her skin flushed deeper violet with passion. Kira traced his features as if committing them to memory, her touch reverent. "If we are separated," she whispered afterward, "I keep you here." She pressed her hand over her heart, where Nyx believed consciousness resided. Always. Morning cycle found them still entwined, planning their escape in hushed voices as the Wanderer hurtled towards Central Command and the reckoning that awaited. Outside their sanctuary, the vast machinery of military justice prepared to separate them. But they had something the military hadn't anticipated. Something that had survived torture, transcended species barriers, defied rational explanation. Time to move, Ethan said as the alarm for shift change sounded. Ready. Kira stood, no longer the broken creature he'd found in a cage, but a warrior reclaiming her destiny. With you, she said, always ready. They moved through the corridors like shadows, toward an uncertain future where the only certainty was each other.